So the rain has finally stopped for me to come outside in the garden and do a few different jobs around here. One of them in particular I've been wanting to film a video on for a few weeks now, and that is all about my favorite type of composting. Today I'm going to be running you through what that is, and I'm also going to be showing you what the finished product is and how I use it as well. If you've followed me for a while, you'll probably know that I absolutely love everything about compost. I think it is such an awesome thing that we should all be doing to not only save kind of waste going to landfill, but also it turns into just the best fertilizer for your garden that is all organic and is something that your plants are going to absolutely love. I have quite a few different compost systems, I suppose you could call it, all around my garden. I've tried so many different types of different methods, but the one that I'm going to run you through today is definitely my favorite, and that is composting in situ. Before I run through that, I'll give a little bit of an overview of some of the other methods I use. Firstly, we have some tumbler systems here, which isn't connected to the ground at all, but you can kind of turn over and get a lot of air in that system. We usually just put all of our food scraps into there and anything that's going to break down really easily, because that makes really fast compost. The downside to that is that it gets really heavy and it's quite hard to turn, particularly just when it's just me in the garden. I usually need Scott or someone else around to help me turn those systems, but they are a really good alternative if you are gardening in an apartment and you don't have a lot of space, or you're worried about the mess that compost is going to make. They're a really good option for that. Another way we compost our food scraps and garden waste here is through our worm farm systems. We've got 2 of these and I've had these for years. I absolutely love worm farming. It is so interesting, and the worm castings that is produced by it are just black gold for your garden, as well as the fertilizer tea that comes out, which is basically just all of the liquid that is filtered through the system. I use that every day on the garden, depending on what needs a feed, and the plants love it. The other ways I've tried is just having a compost pile in the middle of the garden and just letting it all break down naturally. Really awesome, but the downsides is you do kind of get a lot of pests that come into the pile. It usually takes a long time, unless you have a really big pile to start with, to kind of create that heat and little micro environment in there to break everything down. But they are good if you do have a bit of land and you can just afford to let it all break down naturally, particularly if you've got really large things around like palm fronds, or you've cut down some trees. That's a really good alternative for that. Some of the other ones include composting straight into the ground. I'll just bury some food scraps just around the garden where I think might need a little bit of a kick, and the worms naturally come to those areas. I've done that a lot in the past at our previous rental property, and sometimes I will just put all of our food scraps and garden waste just into a big tub and fill it up with water and kind of create a weed tea that I've made in other videos as well. You can also add food scraps into that, and that just leaches out a lot of the nitrogen in whatever material that you're putting into the water. But I always seem to be coming back to this one method of in-situ composting that has just always worked for me, and has so many different benefits rather than just the physical compost that it produces. Okay, so this is the system here that I'm talking about. This is one of the tumbleweed composters. It is, I believe it's 220 litres. These can get a lot bigger, and we do have a really large one up near the pool area, but this size I really like for what I'm going to be talking about now. So the reason why I have all of these different compost systems in our garden is because I believe that it's really important to diversify what you're doing in the garden, and having all of these different composting systems means that usually I can come out here and get fresh compost whenever I want, because I've set up all of these systems to work independently. But usually by the time when I'm starting a new bin or system, another one is also ready. So this one here is ready for its reveal today. This one here has so many other benefits to just what's inside. I've placed this in an area on the top part of the slope of this garden. In this little permaculture patch here, I've created a few different swales because we're on a slope here, and as water and nutrients move down this system, I want these swales to kind of catch whatever that is, rather than just running all the way down into the property. And having this compost here, as everything breaks down and as I water it, it's providing awesome nutrients for this whole area because of where it's positioned. If I was to have this down the very bottom of the garden, it would just flow down and not kind of feed all of the plants that are around it here. So what we put in here usually is just food scraps. We tend to go through a lot of food scraps in our house. We've got 4 people living here, and usually we're cooking for other people as well. So I love to cook and I save as many scraps as I can to make stock, but anything else, it ends up going in here, along with usually a mixture of sugarcane mulch. So you've kind of got that wet and dry and green and brown ratio that there are so many other composting videos talking about, you know, what ratio to have. I'm really lazy in the garden and I like gardening to be as easy as it can. So I don't usually worry too much about technicalities of the ratios. I just put enough wet and dry material in there and also water as well. I then usually use a kind of screw, I can't remember what it's called technically, but it's kind of like a fork screw kind of thing that I fluff up the compost, and that adds another ingredient that is important, which is air. So this has been here for about, I'm going to say about 5 months or so, and it's probably been sitting for about 4 months. It usually takes us about a month or a little bit more to fill up a bin this size with food scraps and everything that comes from the garden. I also did add another bag of horse manure in here as well, so it's got lots of juicy ingredients in there. So when everything is breaking down in this system here, and when I'm adding even just 1 bucket of food scraps, what's happening is the soil around this bin here is being activated because a lot of the different microbes and all of the worms that are in this little patch here are moving through the soil up to this bin and moving out and creating all of these little systems around this bin, which is essentially making soil around this bin as well as inside it. I really like to put things that are nitrogen loving around this compost bin, so I had quite a lot of greens. I've got some Thai basil here, which is just going absolutely crazy, some Lagos spinach, and I've also got a lot of ground covers, including oregano and some alyssum around it as well, to really just maximize all of the benefits that this system here is providing, so that although when I water it, it's going to, you know, leach out and provide everything around here with some food, but it's also just working as a little soil activator. So wherever I place it in the garden is going to make the soil a lot more active. So I'm going to lift it off now and have a look inside and see what it looks like, and talk about how I like to use it on the garden as well. Right, let's see what it looks like. It has been raining a lot, so I'm assuming that a lot of the worms are moving up to the top. I can see a few in there and it's looking pretty good. There's a little look inside there. So this bin was completely full when I stopped adding material in here. So when I'm done with it, all I do is just lift it up. So it is looking really, really awesome, and I saw so many worms in here when I was lifting it off. There are so many moving through this system, and I can tell you I actually didn't add any worms into this system here. You can see them all moving happily around. So the worms that have come in here have obviously come from around the garden where I have sprinkled some worm castings, and they've all moved and made their homes throughout the garden, but come to here for the food. And they will usually come here at the very last stages. I had a lot of soldier fly larvae in this mix when I was first adding food scraps in. They absolutely demolished the food and are some of the best bugs to have in your compost. I always like to remind people when they freak out about having bugs and things moving in their compost system is that is so good and so natural to have. There are probably maybe a few bugs that you might not want. Ants are usually one of them, particularly if they're stinging ants or fire ants or something like that. You can definitely troubleshoot that. But having a lot of this movement, I could even hear things happening in here. It's just so awesome to see. I can see that this mixture is very rough, and that's because I added just a lot of wood chips in here to fill it up. and that's perfectly fine, because what I like to do with this, now that I've lifted it off, I'm going to really gently just spread it out over this area here to keep it in place and provide ongoing food for this area, because I'm not going to be putting it back in the same spot. I'm going to move it up to the native patch up there where I've got some native plants who are desperately in need of some organic matter, and move it around the garden so that all different areas can have the benefit of having in-situ composting. Be really careful for all the worms that are in there. Careful not to stab any worms. Alright, so I'll probably end up spreading this out just a little bit more, but this is, yeah, just the finished product that you get from here. I can also just see in here there's a lot of worm eggs as well. Something that you do need to keep in mind is that you'll probably get things sprouting up here that you might not want in this particular area. I know there's going to be lots of probably tomato seedlings come up here, and just lots of seeds are going to be in this compost that are still going to be viable. So what I like to do is I usually put some cardboard over the fresh compost and then some mulch on top of that, and then I will usually make a hole in the cardboard, or newspaper is a really good option as well, and then plant into that hole so that this is all kind of covered and isn't going to just be a field of tomatoes. But this is all ready now to be planted, and I'm gonna have to think about what I want to plant here, because I've got a nice big spot in the garden. I think maybe I might do some berry bushes back here. We'll see what I've got, but I'm so happy that there's just so much nutrients in this area now. So the last step is setting up the compost bin in its new position, so I'll show you where I'm going to put it next. Right, so I think this is where I'm going to be putting the compost bin next. Hopefully in about a month or two this will be filled up, and this is all surrounded with native plants in this area right next to our bedroom, because I wanted to plant like a nice little native garden here to entice some birds right next to our bedroom. So I've popped it here. It's kind of on the top of where all of the plants are. In this area we add the cat litter from our cats, and just a lot of other mulch as well. So this area has been slowly building up the organic matter, but it is pretty bad soil around here, which is why I've planted a lot of natives which don't seem to mind it, but they're also definitely not going to mind getting a little bit of a boost with this in-situ compost system. One last thing to note is that you definitely don't have to do this on this large of a scale. I'll link a video down below all about how I used different containers from the kitchen, like yogurt containers, ice cream tubs, as in-situ compost systems, which are a lot smaller but technically do the same thing. If you're adding in things that are breaking down and watering it over time, it's just fertilizing whatever plant you place it near. So there's so many different options to compost in situ, as well as just digging food scraps into the ground. This way here is just really good to keep pests out, and something that I've done for years now and have had a lot of success with it. So if you've got any questions, make sure you leave them in the comments down below, and let me know if you've tried this method, what your favorite type of composting is. I love talking about compost, so definitely have a conversation down below, and we can have a chat about it down there. Thank you so much for watching this video. There's always links in the description if you would like to support my channel as well, because I try and put out all of this free content for you all, to help you all learn about gardening and connecting to nature as well. And this is a really awesome natural way of using your waste for providing nutrients for the garden. So thanks again for watching, and until my next video, happy gardening everyone. Bye.